Okay, welcome back. This is the second half of our conversation with David Zindell. I have to say, the conversation really kind of took off here, and we go some places where I didn't think we'd really go, and it's really interesting. So I do hope you all enjoy this. Here we go. Let's make our way over to the bridge.
You mentioned too that, some of the contemporary science fiction is very playful, but, mainly just playful and not necessarily well written, not necessarily with any, deeper issues being explored or meaning. And, I thought of one work that I consider very playful that is in my top three probably of all-time science fiction novels, which would be Lord of Light by Roger Zelazny. Very playful. I mean, even to the point of including a stupid pun. And I don't know if you remember reading that book, but these people are able to transmigrate their souls and consciousnesses into new bodies. And so as part of a dirty trick, the hero Sam barely evades having his consciousness mind put into the body of an epileptic.
Right.
And so he finds a substitute, who's a Shan of, I forget what principality, but then Sam is testing out the gods to see if they're going to do a dirty trick on him. And sure enough, they were planning to do that because this epileptic fit hits the Shan, and he puts it, as he puts it, the fit hit the Shan. And so it's like it's this incredibly playful novel, but still, it's deep and wonderful, and so I have nothing against playfulness, but if that's all that science fiction becomes, to me, it's lost its heart.
Yeah.
And that heart is a sense of wonder, and the sense of wonder does come from contemplation or exploration of the deeper issues. And I don't see how you could get away with that and still produce interesting science fiction. I think there's been a tremendous pressure on writers to write simpler, more easily digestible things. I mean, Robert Silverberg, who was my mentor, one of my mentors, used to talk about this. And he would just come right out and say it, that he felt a tremendous pressure as an author who was commercially published to dumb down his fiction. And I thought that was a tremendously cynical, awful thing, this idea of dumbing down fiction. But I think that has happened inexorably as corporate publishing has taken over and bottom lines and profits have just become paramount. Because if you think about it, what does a company need to do? They need to not only penetrate the market as deeply as they can, but create new market, which means for fiction, new readers. Well, if you're a new reader and you're coming up through an educational system that's been increasingly compromised and standards have been lowered, and I think that's inarguable. I also do coaching, test prep teaching. So I prepare students for tests to take, the tests that they take here in the United States to get into college, the ACT and the SAT. And so I've noticed this, just vocabulary questions or words that stump some of my best students. And I go, these are not difficult words. A lack of knowledge of grammar, to the point where they can't identify nouns and verbs, let alone rules like subject-verb agreement or objective-subjective case. And so there's just been, there's a movie fairly recently called Idiocracy, and just about this, dumbing down of the whole population. So as these people become older and move into fiction, they're going to find most easily digestible works that are simpler. And that simplicity is, first of all, simplicity of language. So shorter sentences, less complex sentences, shorter paragraphs, less vocabulary, or less complex vocabulary. And that's on a one level. On a deeper level, ideas that challenge people can be very difficult for them. So maybe it's best to stay away from what is the meaning of identity, because then as a writer, if I'm writing about identity, I could get into, I could offend somebody, right? I could have this issue of identity politics come up. And so better stay away from that. And so then maybe I shouldn't explore what might it be like to have my identity move from a human identity to being like a dolphin. Like, could a human being identify as a dolphin? Maybe that would be a hot button issue, and maybe I shouldn't explore that. Maybe I shouldn't explore what it's like to be a god because, who knows? Maybe that would offend people or challenge them in a way that they're not used to being challenged. Right. And so I think it's incontrovertible for the most part that's led to this kind of simplification and homogenization of the literature. Across the board, not just in science fiction and fantasy, but in what I've seen, in popular fiction.
Well, the Harry Potter books, I'm thinking, are the last ones that fit a description, at least, of like everybody in the world waiting for that next book, but they were kids, and I thought that was great. It really launched a generation of readers. But again, even Tolkien, right? Tolkien, we all love Tolkien. Bibliophiles know Tolkien. We all read it, when we were young. But there's a whole vast swath of society that just really didn't know anything about it until the movies came out. And then suddenly, it has a much larger cultural impact. But so maybe it's a function of television and movies just having taken over the niche that used to be filled by books because we didn't have anything else.
Well, I noticed this phenomenon a long time ago when I started in the late 80s, going to science fiction conventions. And, I'd hang out with authors. I mean, that's what authors do. I mean, hang out with fans too, but, mostly with authors. And they would start talking about movies they had seen. And after hours of these conversations, I'd go, how come we're not talking about books? We're authors.
Yeah.
Well, why are we talking about movies? So clearly movies have become the dominant storytelling medium in our culture, but they can't do the same thing as books. There's some level of interiority that novels do better than movies do. And so movies can't replace that. And I'm not saying the movies shouldn't exist. I mean, I love movies. I would get with those authors too and talk about my enthusiasm about my favorite movies and why I thought they were good or why they were bad or whatever. But, the experience I had when first time I read Siddhartha, Damien and Steppenwolf by Hesse, I mean, those were my, cutting my teeth as reader novels that really moved me a long time ago. Well, they made a movie out of Steppenwolf. They even had voiceover
right.
to pick up some of that interiority, but it wasn't the same thing. I mean, I would say that the books have changed my life have been irreplaceable, and movies have changed my life too, but not in the same way. It's been on a different level.
Going back to this theme of corporatization, I think it's an interesting microcosm that we're talking about here in the publishing industry, of what's happening at a larger scale to our actual civilization in terms of our ability to do big things, not just think big ideas, but build big things, take on huge projects. Like my entire lifetime, nothing new has happened as far as I can tell technologically except the cell phone. In the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s, they built rocket ships, they built nuclear power plants, they built trains, planes, automobiles, all these new things, enormous new industries given birth. And we haven't had a new airplane in 50, 60, 70 years. Like, how is that even possible? This should be a well-funded, huge industry push to create new technology, but we don't do big things. We haven't sent anyone to space. Well, SpaceX is starting to revive that, I think, but there was the Apollo program and nothing like it ever since. I actually have this short story collection called Hieroglyph. It comes out of the University of Arizona, I believe, and Neil Stephenson's involved, and basically they're contributions by science fiction writers to imagine big things again, to imagine what if we like huge programs, giant projects. Neil Stevenson writes a story about building a 20-kilometer tall building, which seems outrageous. But apparently some people think it might be plausible. And what he says in the foreword is
Wow.
20 kilometers, yeah, all the way right out to space. I don't know if it's plausible. I didn't quite understand the physics behind it, I guess. But anyway, it's a neat story, and it's meant to just make people think big again. And what he says in the preface to this volume is exactly that. It's the corporatization. It's short-term profits above all else. What company could take the kind of long-term risk to invest in some huge thing that's going to take 10 years of failure before you get anywhere? It's profitable. Without being sued by their own shareholders, right? This is just the structure of corporations, that they're actually incapable of doing anything anymore other than making money quickly, as fast as possible. And it's really sad. And, it does, I think, hamstring our entire civilization. Here we are trying to launch rockets, go to Mars. How do you do that kind of thing when you're constantly, it's demanded that money and profit before all else? So it's a sad state of affairs. I don't know how we get out of it.
Yeah, and I think you've touched upon something deeper that's interested me for a long time, which is pace of technology and scientific discovery. I mean, we hear all the time that, particularly ever since back, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 years ago, when Alvin Toffler came out with his book Future Shock, we have this notion that things are changing faster than they've ever changed before. And that's sort of become almost like a given, a dogma. And yet it doesn't seem that way to me. I mean,
Right.
If I ask myself, what's different about my life right now than 50 years ago when I was, going away to college, or even when I was a kid? Well, let me think. I've still got, let me talk about the things that are different. So this is different. I couldn't do a podcast.
Right. Yeah.
They're totally different. I didn't have my little Star Trek communicator, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
didn't have that. And on the level of the podcast course, I have a computer and the internet. But what else has changed? I mean, if I go somewhere, it's still by car or foot or airplane, basically. I still have a house with basically the same kind of heating, electrical burners or gas burners, flush toilets. We have vaccinations. Thank God we have vaccinations. And that hasn't changed since I was little. They had polio vaccine when I was a kid, which was this huge thing. So I think about all these parts of my life and I go, my life hasn't changed that significantly. How about in the 50 years from, let's say, 1880 to 1930 or 1870 to 1920? I'm a little unclear about my dates here, but in that period, no one at the start of that period had electrical lights. Indoor plumbing was rare. No television, no radio, no automobiles. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So that generation, in terms of major impacts to their life through technology, saw much greater changes than we've seen. In terms of science, think about early 20th century. We had theory of relativity, quantum mechanics. Not so long before that, we had Darwin's theory of evolution. What in my lifetime has come along that has been a big scientific breakthrough? Can't think of anything.
Well, I can think of one thing, and that's DNA, right? The structure of DNA, genetics, molecular biology. I'd say that probably happened in your lifetime, early-ish.
Yeah, but still, that was 1950s. So,
yeah.
But that's sort of like a long time ago now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
As you say, what big new things have come along and what big new things are being done. However, I think we're going to have to do some big new thing with climate catastrophe. On some level, I think there's going to have to be a will to come together as a whole planetary civilization and address these problems. Otherwise, it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah. I agree.
Well, in terms of technology and to go back to Neverness, we've got amazing technology, and then we've got the alloy. Myself, I love the outdoors. I love camping. I love being out on the water on boats. I love just being outside and taking in nature. And then I really take in my sci-fi books. They're two opposites in to some degree. Is that something you always need when you write? Do you need the balance of nature and technology? And then in your personal life, how close are you with nature? Are you very close, and do you feel that is so important, and that's why you're writing with science fiction? Your technology is so great, but we're always coming back home to nature.
Yeah, real good question, because it gets to the heart of what I consider the most interesting questions, which would be what is the nature of humanity, and where is humanity headed? Are clearly we come out of nature, right? I mean, we didn't just, well, I don't believe we were just created out of something from the will of a creator just put on earth. Mm-hmm. So clearly we come out of nature. Clearly in some ways we transcend nature, but to what degree? So I think that interplay for me is crucial. I would be bored silly writing a book that took place totally in some kind of highly technological future in which people spend all their time around machines or computers and had no connection to the natural world. Maybe a whole novel that took place in some kind of simulation. That would be unreal and uninteresting to me. Probably a novel that took place wholly in nature, where, if I just set out to write a Tarzan novel, the guy only had a hunting knife and a loincloth. I probably wouldn't want to do that either. So I think that's a reason that both of those elements come in there, because it's sort of like a tug of war there. What does it mean to be human? Clearly, we haven't been just a part of nature without technology for a long time. In fact, people, and I don't know if this is big where you are in Canada, but here in the United States, like the Paleolithic diet is really big. Right. We have to eat just like our caveman ancestors, and some people, and that's a bad word, caveman now, I realize, and I won't say primitive ancestors, our indigenous ancestors or whatever. We have to eat like that, and that means a raw diet, right? Because, that's clearly people ate raw foods, but no, that's not true. Literally what made us human is fire and cooking food. It made meat easier to chew, more easily digestible. Same with plant foods, and that enabled our jaws to get smaller, enabled all these changes in the human form. So somehow technology is intimately intertwined with what it means to be human. But what does that mean? How intertwined? Mm-hmm. Is it our destiny to create these intelligent machines, these AI that will transcend us, and then we can just kind of like bow out from the great evolutionary march into the future? Will we have some kind of symbiosis with machines? And again, I don't have answers to those questions, but exploring those questions has been very interesting to me, because the alloy are living much closer to nature, and yet they have a technology. Their technology actually is not what I understood to be that of Neanderthals, but of what I knew to be the technology of the Inuit. So they're practicing a technology that's actually still used to some extent, although the Inuit have rifles now and they're not probably spearing seals, but not so long ago they were. And so that was very, very interesting to me, very important, because I think if we lost that connection to the natural world, we would in some sense lose part of our humanity. And so I didn't want to lose that in my writing, because then I feel like I would lose part of my roots as a human being.
So yourself, you feel quite connected to nature. You're in Denver. When you step out your front door, do you see the mountains? Are you high up? Are you looking at the city? And is this something that's very important for you to be able to see the beauty of nature
Yeah.
at
I mean,
home?
Colorado is a beautiful place, and indeed, these days in Denver, most days you can see the mountains. When I was younger, I first moved to Colorado in 1974, 73. You couldn't. It was just a big brown cloud. And so, the invention of the catalytic converter and EPA rules, that actually has cleared up the air, so that you can see the mountains. And it's important for me to actually have that view, but important to get out in nature too. When I lived in Boulder for many, many years, it was right there. I mean, we had bears in the city, right? You walking along the creek path and you run into a big pile of bear scat, and so I always thought that was cool, and would always want to have that as part of my life. In fact, every once in a while, I have friends who are getting older and they're sick, and some of them might, die eventually. And so when I think about that, for me, I think about, oh my God, get me out of the hospital, get me out of my bed. I've got to somehow, even if it's just getting out to the park, just lay out in the grass so I can look up at stars when I die. I mean, this is always been a kind of weird fantasy of mine.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Well, I loved that contrast in Neverness, especially, and I actually I didn't quite get it, I think, until the third time I read a book. Sometimes I'm a little dense, but that the moral core was an ecological message, right? That you set up this contrast between the Alaloi, the sort of indigenous culture, giving back to the land, living in a closed cycle, never taking more than what you need, compared to, and then you took us out to this far, far space-based mystery to understand what's happening with the Vild. And when I got it this time, when I read that story about what's happening with the Vild is this rabid consumption of materials by humans, right? Just to spread ourselves more and more and more, and it didn't matter how much we ate, how many stars we killed, how much of the universe was destroyed, as long as we were just pumping out more humans. And I think that contrast is extremely effective, right? When you take us all the way from living in ice caves to all the way out to this sort of space story about unaware people, people who just haven't uh, put themselves inside an ecological context anymore. I think that was a very powerful message, and I think for me, when I think back on when you wrote this, this is a much more common message today. I think it's become part of our culture to really start to cut back on mass consumption and live a more balanced life. And you were really ahead of the time, I think, in the '80s to have written that book. Was that a theme that was obvious to you? Is that what you set out to sort of write about with Neverness? Is sort of give us an ecological, moral tale, or did it just come about as you wrote it?
I would say that was steeped in my bones, just growing up in the '60s. In the 1950s, you had Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, about the spread of pesticides, just totally messing up nature. And then so throughout the '60s, there was that whole hippie back to the land movement. Something between a celebration, appreciation, and glorification of the Native Americans, and about the sense of living living sanely with nature. Although that was an oversimplification, because some Native Americans weren't so pristinely perfect in their actions. So that doesn't really do them justice. But much more so than our civilization, they did live more in harmony with their environment. And so I think it was impossible to grow up in the '60s and have any kind of sensitivity at all, and not just have that seep into your bones.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Were you a hippie, David?
No.
You weren't. So you observed.
No. So I wanted to be, sort of, but I knew many, but they were always dirty and living hard.
Right.
And I was just too much of a spoiled suburban white kid, to go, I can't do this. I don't want to panhandle. I don't want to, crowd into the Haight-Ashbury. And well, of course I was really too young for the Haight-Ashbury scene, but I never quite was a hippie. I did grow my hair long as soon as I graduated high school. Marijuana. Were you aware that Bill Clinton said that he tried marijuana but didn't inhale?
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember that.
So I was one of the 3 people in America that believed him, because that's what I would do. I'd be at a party and I wouldn't want to be uncool, but I could not take any burning gas into my lungs. And so I would literally do that. So I thought, well, if I could do it, maybe Bill Clinton could.
Right.
So drugs played very little part in my life on a week-to-week, month-to-month basis, except that psychedelics played a huge part in my life, because the 6 times I have done psychedelics were of just life-changing proportions. Mm-hmm. And so that, in one form or another, has made its way into my books. So, that aspect. I did have long hair at one point. I have taken psychedelics 6 times in, I don't know, 50 years plus. I eat organic food if I can. Does that make me a hippie? I don't know.
These days, I'm sure the definition is a little bit loose. Your work is so ahead of its time. It's almost psychedelic in its form when we talk about the mathematics and traveling through the manifold. It's almost a natural question. Were you inspired by psychedelics a little bit? Did you have a great experience and it made you look at the stars and see distance a little bit differently? Did you feel time a little bit differently? Because that can happen with psychedelics. And so you answering that is very interesting, and your work can be seen in a different way for myself a little bit. Because I noticed it a little bit, but I can't assume, because some people obviously don't need to have a tool like a psychedelic to think of these ideas, but sometimes they just they truly inspire. And you did say they inspired you. You had some experience that were life-changing, that kind of altered your idea of what the universe is. Is that true?
I'm going to be a little bit more precise than that. Confirm my suspicions of the way the universe works.
Interesting.
So going way back to my childhood, I had mystical experiences. And, I remember one time, and I think I talk about this in my memoir, Splendor, of playing baseball. I was out in the outfield, and someone hit a ball kind of like right towards me, and then time slowed down, as time often does on psychedelics, or I believe it does. And I just saw this ball floating towards me, kind of like lined against the blue sky. And then I just totally got lost in the blueness of the sky, and I had this mystical experience of expansiveness. And the importance of catching this baseball absolutely vanished. I was just into the colors, into the sky, into my sense of being the sky. And of course, I missed the catch and everyone yelled at me. But, that was like indicative of what was happening around that time, when I was maybe 8 or 9 or 10, that age range. And then I tried to describe this to my parents, and, I hadn't read Alan Watts. I hadn't read any of the sparse psychedelic literature at that time. I didn't know about psychedelics. I didn't know about mystical experiences. I didn't know any of this stuff. And so I said, Mom, the strange things happening. And she was trying to describe it. I said, well, it's kind of like being dizzy. And so I called it my dizzy spells. And my mother was very disturbed. Traditionally in our culture, anything that hints of what Sigmund Freud called the oceanic experience is pretty much classified as a pathology. So my mom did what any good mom did. She took me to the doctors, to a psychiatrist. And
Wow.
I think I'm lucky that I didn't escape medication. And the doctor did not correctly diagnose this as a mystical experience, but he did not also, thank God, classify as pathology. He said, well, I think your son is maybe just wanting to escape a little bit because he senses that you, meaning my mother, and my dad are having problems. I'm very disturbed by their marital problems. But I knew it wasn't that. I thought this is the biggest bullshit I've ever heard. Although, as a kid, I wouldn't have said that. I was too polite. But, these experiences were very, very powerful. And so then, as a result of that, any literature, any story that I came across that in any way hinted of that, of course, I just gobbled it up. And then, I started reading books about mysticism. And I realized that this is like a thing. This is a big, ancient tradition. And that, in fact, many religions have grown up around the mystical experiences, the mystery cults, or mystery sects, whatever you want to call them. The Eleusinian mysteries in ancient Greece, possibly based around drinking a psychedelic. The Zoroastrians drinking soma, which was probably some sort of psychedelic. All these things have been huge in religion and world history. And so as I got older, I had a curiosity about all this, but it didn't play out until I took mescaline when I was 19 at Bard College in New York State. And I went out into the woods and I had a huge experience. I could feel the life of the trees. And, I don't want to talk about this too much because, people talking about their trips, it's really kind of like boring at this point, and it all sounds the same. And, there is a sense that's ineffable, but, it changed my life. That was the first time. And I feel like it would be impossible for me to have been the writer I've become without that playing a huge part.
Amazing. Did you ever also pursue? I mean, Buddhism and other contemplative traditions are pretty apparent in your writing. Did you ever pursue any of like meditation, just those kinds of experiences, but through sort of disciplined practice rather than psychedelics?
Yeah, I have, and I have meditated, and I still do. And then there was a time where I sort of cobbled together my own practice, like taking little bits and pieces. And also in my memoir Splendor, I talk about this. I call it nights of spirit, fugue, and fire, because some of it would be like dancing around the fire, some of it would be meditation, some of it would be chanting. And so I just did a lot of different things, and then like kept a journal, kind of like actually more of a scientific approach of like what combination would actually produce this effect. And I was like trying to approach it scientifically, being a real respecter and lover of science. Because I never saw this dichotomy between science and spirituality, or science and mysticism, science and religion. I thought, there's only one truth, whatever it is, and on some deeper level, it's all got to hang together. But meditation, yeah, I think it's very valuable. But as Timothy Leary said, 350 micrograms of LSD are worth 10 years of meditation. So
that's been my experience too.
Do you believe these mystical experiences and the psychedelics themselves to just be functions of the brain, or do you believe in spirit? Is there something a little bit beyond? I know that's a really big question, Marty. I think you've got a big one like that. That has to do with what's the meaning of life. But are these just functions of the brain, do you believe, or do you believe that there's something else?
Are you tuning into sort of an objective, bigger world, say spiritual world?
So these are really hard questions. Really,
well, that's why we invited you here. We expect the meaning of life to come out within the next few minutes.
Yeah, we need the answer, because we just need to know.
Just need to know. So first thing to say is I always sort of hated the word spirituality, because that implied there was something called spirit. as distinct from matter.
Right.
And so one of my, I guess, whole reasons for being absorbed in the mystical is just the sense that there really is no separation between spirit and matter. There isn't the brain with these biochemical things going on, and then that somehow produces consciousness. I think that's a very simplistic, wrong notion of things. Within the past year, and I'm part of this discussion group with a really brilliant friend, we've been going through philosophy of idealism, and so that turns all that around. It's not that all there is material. Somehow these collisions of electrons and arrangements in the higher forms of matter, or moving up into neurons, exchanging bursts through the synapses, electrochemical bursts. Somehow that's what consciousness is, or somehow produces consciousness. So the idealism philosophy turns that on its head and says, all there is mind or spirit, or whatever you want to call it, consciousness, and that the whole material universe, me, this cup, are all objects in this universal mind. And I can't swallow either of those.
Very cool.
Bernardo Kastrup is kind of an upcoming philosopher, and he's written on this extensively, and there's lots that I love about that, but lots that I don't. So at this time, I just want to get beyond the need to think about it in those terms. There's something going on. There's something that we're all made of, and I don't think that's real. I don't think it's an object in some kind of universal mind, but what is it? What is the connection between mind and matter? Well, I've written about that in my books. I think about it all the time. Have I solved the problem? No. Is it solvable? I don't know if it is solvable. I don't know if I want it to be solvable. I kind of like the idea that there's some kind of mystery that we're never going to figure things out. And that mystery does get towards the meaning of life, that just living in the mystery of recognizing that there's a mystery, and then being unable to help trying to figure out the mystery, but unable actually to figure it out, is kind of what makes life, gives life a lot of its meaning and spice. At least for me. I mean, I realize I'm weird. I'm the science fiction writer interested in philosophy, but for me, that is kind of the way it plays out.
Well, that's a lot of, it's a pretty common ending to, not ending, but answer to the mystical and contemplative traditions is that it is ineffable ultimately, that there is something that you can directly experience to answer this question. But once you try to put it into words or analyze it and take it apart into concepts, it just doesn't hold together anymore. It's interesting that you told us this about your mystical experience as a child. I also had those kinds of experiences. I once fell asleep in the forest under an apple tree, and when I woke up, I was enlightened, as far as I could tell in retrospect. I had that sort of oceanic, connected to all life feeling, and I could feel the trees, and I went home very disoriented, and then my parents bundled me in the car and took me to church, when I realized, wow, this is not where I want to be at all. I just got in touch with the main vein of what spirituality should be about, and boy, sitting in church listening to this guy talk to me from a pulpit is not it. That's a really interesting story. I also had another one where I got hit by a car when I was really small. I was crossing on a left turn, I think, and the car stopped just in time, and it just sort of tapped me, and I fell over. And I call this my Matrix experience, because the time slowed down completely. I remember just seeing the world sort of tilt over as I went towards the ground, sort of frame by frame by frame, and then I hit the ground, and everything changed back again, and I got up and ran away. But these are real experiences. It's very interesting what's going on in our minds.
And that all makes sense to me. What's also interested me is that if we all are part of this oneness, whatever you want to call that, whether it's spiritual in nature or physical in nature, or neither, neti, neither this nor that, as they say in the East, then why don't more people more of the time experience that bigger connection?
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know, but it seems to me that is a huge drive in people's lives. That's the fundamental drive behind religion, or going to a football game. You go into that stadium and everybody's shouting, and someone's about to score a goal, and it's like people are almost like taken out of themselves into this greater joyous group feeling, and that's a fundamental human drive. And why it doesn't happen more, I don't know. And I guess people are searching for that all the time when they come home from a hard day work and they drink a few beers, when they make love, when they go out in nature. So that makes sense. And I think one of the sadnesses and sicknesses of our civilization is so many people are so cut off so much of the time that they have to either find a good outlet for this or go a little bit crazy, because I think we are all a little bit crazy right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, your work definitely allows us to really experience, or at least search through these questions we're asking right now, these big questions. You walk us through it in a very adventurous, fantastical way, and it makes the questions so fun to seek, or the answers so fun to seek. So happy for the work you've done, and I cannot wait. There's a new book coming soon that is connected to Neverness. When can we expect that, David? I'm sorry to just do a 360 there, or a 180, but
Yeah.
When can we expect that? Is that in the works now? Is it through a process of editing, or?
Yeah, it's with my editor now, but that's what I was mentioning earlier about how the pandemic has messed publishers' time publication schedules up.
Right.
So I'm not exactly sure when this is scheduled. I think it's probably about a year from now. So it's quite a long time. But
well, that gives me time to catch up on more of the Dan Lowe story myself.
I went through my copy of Neverness and annotated it last night with all my favorite underlined passages, and I've gathered the various answers to the meaning of life that you propose in that book, and I'm just going to quickly scan through. I think the timekeeper first says, he's a bit of a nihilist. He says, the secret of life is life. It goes on, and that's all there is. And then later on,
by the way, this is a treat for me, Marty, because if you had asked me where are all the places you discuss this, I couldn't have answered this. So this is going to be an absolute treat for me. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. That's great. Well, it was a treat for me too. This third time that I read it, I just took a pen and I just underlined all the things I loved, and I've realized I should do that more often, because now I can flip through a book in 15 minutes and just pull out all the things I love and remember. So what I love and remember is your answer. That actually helped me a lot this time when I read this, because I had lost a cat, my firstborn feline son. I considered him, and he was the first animal that I ever took care of for his entire life, and it really hurt. It really broke me up. And when I was reading Neverness around the same time, and one of the answers you propose is the secret of life is more life. To be a link in the eternal unbroken chain of life. This was the secret of life. There was nothing else. No other immortality. No deeper meaning. And I think that's a wonderful answer. It's not trite. I think it's quite true. It's a bit of a tautology. It's a mystical sort of answer. But it let me get another cat. Honestly, I couldn't get through my heartbreak over losing this cat that I loved so much, And ultimately, I got another cat. Looked kind of similar, female this time instead of male. And boy, the first time that she took a nap on my chest, she just healed that hole in my heart. And I really believe that the secret of life is more life. Maybe there's nothing more to say than that. So I love that. The Agathanians, they gave us a different answer. They said the secret of life is just sheer joy, which is, I think, another great one. The Remembrancers, Thomas Rain, I think, said the secret of life is to be remembered. And I think that's something many cultures have taken to heart. And finally, I found this wonderful passage. This is Mallory Ringess saying this. He said, "How ironic, I thought, that I had come to the island seeking the secret of life in the tissues of women and men, only to find it in the rushing waves, in the cries of the eider and snow geese, in all the wild things of the world." So thank you for saying those words so long ago, and for giving us that insight. And I was just wanting to give you an opportunity to see if you've learned anything more since then. If you were to, I know this is a terrible question to ask anyone, but heck, I'm just going to do it because I feel like the exuberance and insight of your writing allows it. What is the meaning of life? What do you have anything to add to those insights in the 30 years since you've written this book?
I'm just looking what you just said, and because I wrote them down. I'm just trying to think about this and digest this a bit. Yes, I don't think I would have had any character say something that I didn't believe in, because nowhere in that list of things you just read is there, the secret of life is he who dies with the most toys wins.
That's right.
That wasn't there. It wasn't, getting laid as often as possible. It wasn't, wasn't anything like that. It certainly wasn't power.
Mm-hmm.
So all those are true. I'm trying to think if there's a bigger thing that would encompass all that. Secret of life is more life. Secret of life is joy. To be remembered. Sounds of nature, the sense of nature, so all those things, yeah. So if I had to maybe put it together into a bigger umbrella, it is the sense that there is a oneness, and I, when I was younger, did not dare to think of it as God because I thought I was an atheist. I grew up, if I had a idea system, or you couldn't really call it religion, but it would have been scientific materialism. Okay, so I couldn't have used the word God, but now I feel able to do that just because why not? Mm-hmm. So meaning to life. What is the meaning to life? It's that we're all part of this, and we are how that bigger, greater part experiences things. I think in almost every one of my novels, I've used this line from Shelley, which is Hymn to Apollo, which is, I am the eye of the universe, which beholds itself and knows itself divine. And that for me has always been huge. We are the experiencing part of the universe. And we do that through life and creating more life. So that part is played in. And what's the point of doing all this if all we're experiencing is ugliness and torture and frustration? And so, yeah, I mean, it's worthless unless it's about joy. Unless on some level, this is a joyous experience. To be remembered, well, memory plays a huge role in this, right? Because what meaning would our lives have if we're just like, as they say, how's this go? Life's a bitch and then you die, right? It's like we just have these experiences that are just wiped out. Yeah. So there wasn't some kind of universal memory, some kind of Akashic record, some kind of, these experiences are preserved in eternity. And, I think I've talked about this, and I don't remember if this goes into my novels or not, but talk about, say, the Christian idea of salvation. My understanding would be, okay, you die and then your body is resurrected and, you just get to hang around in paradise. But to me, that isn't enough. That's just like, your final self, whoever you are, gets resurrected, and then you have this young body. But my concept would be every single moment, every single thing we experience is recorded, and not just recorded as a memory, but on some level, and it's that level where time slows down. It's kind of the eternal state. These experiences are existing eternally, and on that level, probably all of them are joyous, but I haven't figured that part out. Why is there suffering? Why is there pain? How does that play into it? I haven't figured that part out. And then the nature part of this, why is it that it's much easier to experience these great transcendent experiences out in the woods or by the coast of British Columbia or Oregon, which are two of my favorite places? Why easier there than in a factory or in a laundromat? Because after all, if there is just this oneness, then a laundromat is just as much part of that one as oneness as any place. But yet it doesn't really play out that way. So maybe people are busy having mystical experiences in laundromats all the time, but you never read a memoir saying, oh, my 40 nights in a laundromat, always my 40 days hiking the Pacific Crest Trail or something like that,
Yeah.
So all those things play into it. So that would be the bigger overarching thing that we're, and I do say this in Neverness, it is like all food for the gods. That's what our lives are. And one question that still interests me, and if anyone wants to contact me and give me ideas about this, I'd love to hear them. But if that is true, then why isn't one experience just as good as another? Why is, the experience of holding your newborn and looking into their eyes and just seeing this sense of wonder coming out into the world, why is that a better experience that I feel people should seek more than the experience of Auschwitz or a car wreck? And I don't have an answer to that. But in terms of meaning of life, I think there is this higher thing that we're meant to pursue and should pursue. And it's better probably to pursue nature than, civilization of laundromats.
Amazing. Wonderful.
Yeah, amazing, David. Wow.
Incredible. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciated you taking the time to speak with us. It's been really insightful and rewarding.
Thank you, Marty.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tristan. It's really been a pleasure. And, of course, I like to talk. I'm a writer.
Well, maybe in a year from now, we can maybe do this again. If you're up for it and the book has come out, or by that time, I'm sure Marty and I will have read more of your work, so there's more to talk about. But even the philosophy and the exploration of the mind is great stuff for us to talk about. We love it, and you responded so well to everything there. I love your answers. It's almost like you're mentoring me a little bit too, and I'm so appreciative of that, David. So thank you so much for that.
Well, you asked me great questions and got me inspired. So thank you for your time.
Yeah. Wow, I have to say, that was one of the coolest things I think we've done with the show. I really enjoyed it. Marty did awesome. Oh my goodness, where would we be without him? All right, thanks everyone. Until next time.